Hello Star Wars fans, and welcome to episode 110 of Journey into Legends. Today we'll be reading Shatterpoint by Matthew Stover. Shatterpoint was released in 2003, and it follows Mace Windu on a mission during the Clone Wars. I am so excited to read this one. Matthew Stover blew me away with Traitor, and I've heard such great things about this book as well. So without further ado, let's read and review. Alright, so this book takes Mace Windu back to his home planet of Haruun Kal to investigate the disappearance or possible fall to the dark side of his old Padawan, Depa. And the very beginning of this book does a really good job of setting the tone, with Depa sending a very gruesome message to Mace, a hologram of some dead natives of the planet. I must admit, I wasn't actually a huge fan of the first about third of this book. The early chapters of Mace in Pelik Ba being interrogated by Ep.110 and ambushed by the Koronai just wasn't very interesting to me. It took until he met Nick Rostu and the others, and they headed out into the jungle for this book to get interesting for me. Once in the jungle, we got some great discussions about morality, the nature of war, the role of the Jedi in the war, the dark side, and more, as Mace's perspective on light and dark, the war, and the Jedi is shifted. This section was also extremely dark and gritty, and it didn't shy away from not just telling us about the brutalities of war, but showing us. Specifically when we meet Car Vaster, who seems to be the book's physical embodiment of the summertime war between the Koronai and the Balawai, we truly see how vicious and brutal the fighting is. There's a whole section around the middle of this book that's probably my favorite of the entire book. Mace is left to watch over his Koronai allies Besh and Chalk, who are in a sort of medically induced coma. Mace, Besh and Chalk, and a small group of Balawai children Mace rescued are all hiding in a jungle outpost when a Balawai hunting party arrives and is ambushed by some Koronai. A huge fight ensues, and while Mace is gone, one of the children, Terrell, tries to kill Besh and Chalk in their sleep. Car Vaster comes in and kills Terrell. It's a super shocking and brutal turn of events that really puts into perspective how Mace isn't used to this type of hatred and tribalism. It's also just extremely uninhibitedly violent, as Vasker literally kills a child in cold blood, and the book describes it in gruesome detail. One of the best parts about this book was that it included some journal entries of Mace Windu's that documented his mission on the planet. It was an interesting change of pace throughout the book, and it provided some neat insights into Mace Windu as a character. A personal favorite moment of mine is when Mace describes having nightmares of Coruscant, which he sees as a seat of peace and civilization, becoming a dense jungle. He sees the destruction of the Jedi and the death of the Republic. He describes seeing orbital bombardments from immense ships of impossible design. All of this is symbolic and poignant as we understand just how important the Jedi Order is to Mace, and the chaos of the jungle affects him. But it's also an eerily accurate foreshadowing of what eventually happens to Coruscant during the Yuuzhan Vong War. I don't know if it was meant to be a direct reference to those events, given that this is Matthew Stover we're talking about, the author of Traitor. It's certainly more than likely. Either way, I absolutely loved that connection, intentional or not. The final act of this book culminates in a massive battle on Haruun Kal as hundreds of gunships descend on the planet, as do the armies of the Republic and the Confederacy. This is where the book lost me a bit. Most of the book felt very introspective and philosophical, with the few action scenes throughout mostly leaning into gritty, bloody realism rather than the usual Star Wars battle with blasters and ships and spectacle. So this battle felt a little out of place from the rest of the book, as the pace just suddenly sped up, the scale expanded, and the book got less intimate and felt less unique. However, I do appreciate the battle's place in the story, as it was quite satisfying to see Mace's efforts lead to the end of the decades-long summertime war. Anyways, alongside the larger battle, we also had the more personal stakes between Mace and Nick, as they were betrayed by Vastor and Depa. With all the obvious inspiration from Apocalypse Now and Heart of Darkness, with Deppa playing a Colonel Kurtz type of role, I was expecting a bit more from Deppa's character. I did enjoy her scenes and her role in the story, and she was certainly given more depth here than in any other story of hers, but she didn't quite live up to the hype for me. The reveal that she really was lost to the dark side just didn't feel quite as earned as it should have. Despite my few nitpicks, this book was still absolutely fantastic. I'm sure when it came out, it blew any expectations for a Mace Windu novel out of the water. Mace was given such depth to his character, in large part because of his journal entries, but also because of how well the war and the jungle were used as a narrative backdrop. Overall, Stover continues to inject his books with so much philosophy and a deep exploration of themes like war, violence, and human nature. Next, we have a short story from the Hasbro short story collection, Equipment by Matthew Stover. This story follows a clone gunner named CT-6774 during the Battle of Haruun Kal. It's mostly just action, but there is an underlying little story being told about clones taking care of their equipment, and at the end, the clone relents that they are really just the Republic's equipment. Overall, it's a fine little story, nothing too special. The best thing I can say about it is that it doesn't overstay its welcome. This was less than 10 pages long, and that's all we needed. Now that we're starting to read a lot of the Clone Wars era novels, I think it's a good time to start reviewing the Clone Wars Adventures comics. These are little stories in the style of the 2003 cartoon, and I'm really excited to start reading this series. Anyways, today we have Volume 1, which has 3 stories, starting with Blind Force, which follows Anakin and Obi-Wan on a mission to the planet of Nivek. In a battle where they can't see, they blindfold themselves and rely only on the Force, in a great parallel to Obi-Wan training Luke in A New Hope. They end up completing their mission when Anakin leads Obi-Wan to the Separatist droid factory, and they destroy it. This was a fun little story that perfectly captured the energy of the characters. Both Obi-Wan and Anakin learned from each other, and there was a fun little connection to Episode 4. Next, we have Heavy Metal Jedi, which follows Mace Windu and Saesee Tiin during the Battle of Iktoch. Fighting side by side, they debate tactics, Mace preferring a more precise, systematic approach, while Tiin argues for a more strong, direct approach. In the end, they end up winning and agree that it doesn't matter who's right as long as the Jedi win. This one was decent, it was cool to see Saesee Tiin in action, and I love this art style. And finally, our last story is Fierce Currents, which follows Kit Fisto during the Battle of Mon Calamari. In this story, Fisto is looking for the Quarren commander when he learns that the Quarren are receiving their orders telepathically. He eventually learns that there is a creature in the sea known as the Mawapa, which in great numbers can become telepathic. The Mawapa says that the Mon Calamari thinks that they own the planet, so they decided to aid the Quarren. Kit Fisto then tells the Mon Calamari that they should use their skills as diplomats to come up with a solution that helps everyone, including the Mawapa and the Quarren. Overall, this was probably my least favorite story of the issue. We've already seen Kit Fisto and the Battle of Mon Cala in the Clone Wars show, and this just wasn't an interesting enough extension to that battle. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for my next review where I return to some Jude Watson content with Legacy of the Jedi. See ya.